This is another iRaw podcast.
Hello, I'm Emilia Leese, and welcome to Season 4 of Think Like a Vegan, a companion podcast to my book entitled Think Like a Vegan, which is also available in paperback and audiobook. My guest today is Rimona Afana, and we'll be talking about why vegans, and everyone else, should care about genocide and ecocide in Gaza. Rimona is a Romanian-Palestinian researcher, activist, and artist. She researches and writes about war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes against nature, and non-human animals. One of her most recent pieces, you can read it for free online. It's about Israel's crimes against the dead and unborn, and it appears in Current Affairs. I'll link to the piece in the show notes. Welcome, Rimona. It's fantastic to have you here on Think Like a Vegan, and I really appreciate all the work that you do and that you've come to the show today.
Hey, Emi. Thank you for having me, and I value your solidarity with humans and non-humans in Palestine amid a sea of indifference in the supposed animal rights movement.
I empathize with that. Before we hear from Rimona, I will read this passage from her paper on crimes against animals and the environment, which she'll talk to us about today. And you'll hear echoes of previous episodes on war and animals, like episode 18 with Stacey Banwell, or episode number 15 with Sarah Van Hoosen and Josh Milburn. Rimona writes, "The atrocities in Gaza are a sordid reminder of how the military-industrial complex drives genocide and ecocide. Violence brings immense profit to weapons corporations. Weapons do not only harm humans. Advanced technologies of violence also impact animals during both war and peace. They allow the colossal scale and efficiency of killing, and distance physically and physiologically the killer from the killed." With that, Rimona, the floor is yours.
So I'm sharing today a project I've been working on for the past 2 years nearly on the forgotten victims of the atrocities in Gaza, non-human animals and nature. Besides the horrific impact on humans, the genocidal and ecocidal assault on Gaza has harmed many animals and has turned the strip into a toxic wasteland which can no longer sustain life. I write about this because on my dad's side, our family is from and some still in Gaza, and also because for the past 20 years I've worked academically and civically on crimes against both humans and non-humans. While now I can only detail a fraction of my findings, here's a breakdown of the areas covered in my research. First, I document hundreds of thousands to millions of animals in Gaza killed, injured, maimed, starved, displaced, or looted. Next, I show how some animals have been weaponized by Israel, turned into both combatants and victims. Then I discuss the toxicity from explosives and destroyed infrastructure, the severe damage to plants and soil, and the massive greenhouse gas emissions from war, pre-war, and post-war activities. Zooming out, I examine the lasting ties between mass atrocity and epigenetics. Finally, I show how the military-industrial complex drives both genocide and ecocide. I then discuss the paralysis of international law, its failure to prevent, stop, and repair mass atrocity, and our role in confronting impunity and outsourcing, which are key features of crimes in Palestine. So why should vegans and animal rights activists care? Because crimes are intersectional, and so should solidarity be. Israel's war on Gaza is both genocidal and ecocidal. We can't disentangle one from the other. Those with compassion and integrity need to care about both human and non-human victims. But since compassion and accountability are so often lacking for the suffering of humans, there's not much left for non humans, lower on conventional hierarchies of victimhood. Neutrality amid mass atrocities, complicity, and so many, including scholars and activists who've built careers of supposedly fighting injustice, colleagues and friends I respected, have chosen silence. Nearly all major animal rights organizations have remained silent on Gaza. I've been witnessing this indifference and cowardice with heartbreak and outrage. We can't credibly be single issue social justice warriors, closing our eyes to mass atrocity against people while supposedly being progressive about animal rights. And the other way around, human rights experts lecturing on ethics and legalities with animal corpses on their plates. Sadly, the conscience of many seems to pause when it comes to Palestine. So, a bit of context first. Genocide is unfolding in Gaza as recognized by thousands of genocide scholars, legal experts, UN special rapporteurs, UN commissions of inquiry, local and international human rights organizations, Holocaust survivors, as well as humanitarian workers, physicians, and army veterans who've returned from Gaza. If it took nearly 2 years of atrocities for some to wake up, now there's hardly any controversy left. However, the ecocidal facet of this annihilation campaign remains outside mainstream discourse. 723 days of relentless atrocities haven't spared animals in nature. The tons of bombs dropped on Gaza and the destructive ground operations have taken the life of countless animals and have destroyed parts of nature which sustain the lives of humans and non humans. War doesn't only harm humans, it also causes death and protracted suffering to non human animals. It destroys or damages plants and microorganisms, all in symbiotic relations, impacting ecosystems for decades or even centuries. Unique about the atrocities in Gaza are two aspects. First, the catastrophic proportion of their effects, both currently and intergenerationally. Second, they come in a context of exceptional prior criminality and impunity spanning nearly 1 century. We have Israel's settler extractive colonialism, arguably the last active colonial project in the world. We have the longest illegal military occupation in modern times. We have annexation, ethnic cleansing, routine war crimes, crimes against humanity, human rights violations, apartheid. We have decades long US and European complicity, corporate profiteering, and now we add genocide and ecocide. These are widely documented realities breaking the lives of millions in Palestine, humans and non humans. Israel's ongoing genocidal and ecocidal assault on Gaza is among the worst contemporary atrocities, a live streamed war of annihilation. As documented by the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in their latest report on September 24th, Israel has killed nearly 66,000 people, 83% of them civilians. It's injured and maimed over 167,000, with tens of thousands missing. It's displaced 2 million people, nearly the entire population of Gaza, and destroyed or damaged 92% of housing units, 88% of commerce and industry entities, and 77% of the road network. This official death toll is an undercount, as documented by multiple studies. Probably between 200 and 300,000 people have been killed. A recent study even estimates 680,000 if we include missing people and indirect deaths caused by the genocidal conditions imposed on Gaza, which include the destruction of the housing, medical, sanitation, and food infrastructure, which has created a humanitarian crisis of apocalyptic proportions. This has contributed to deaths from starvation, dehydration, untreated or poorly treated war injuries, chronic illnesses, infectious diseases, and other factors. So let's look at the impact on non-humans and nature. Animals in Gaza have been suffering for 723 days from this genocidal ecocidal assault. Amid war, animals, and especially those with complex sentience, blown to pieces, left to die in agony under the rubble, dying slowly from starvation, dehydration, untreated injuries, infectious or chronic illnesses, they're not unlike us. They also suffer physically and psychologically from fear, pain, hunger, thirst, cold, or heat. The impact on sentient beings is immense. As documented by Euromed Human Rights Monitor, about 97% of Gaza's animals have been killed by bombing, starved to death, or looted by July. Hundreds of thousands of animals killed, with 93% of poultry farms fully destroyed, 97% of cows, sheep, goats, and 94% of donkeys, mules, and horses killed by bombing or starvation. This confirms the findings of prior studies. The Food and Agriculture Organization documented that by spring 2024, 95% of Gaza's cattle had died and fewer than 43% of sheep and 37% of goats were still alive. The worst affected was the poultry sector, with only about 1% of birds left alive. Animals used for recreation have also suffered. Nearly all zoos in Gaza have been destroyed, animals dying from bombardment, starvation, and lack of veterinary care. By early 2024, also about 90% of horses in Gaza's equestrian clubs had been killed, while others went missing. Many animals who survived the destructive air and ground operations eventually died from starvation, dehydration, or untreated illnesses and injuries. Given the severe famine deliberately inflicted by Israel, affecting every human and non-human animal in Gaza, we've seen grim scenes like people and animals starving to death, dogs eating murdered humans, or children and stray cats and dogs all scavenging through trash. Alongside Yemen and Sudan, Gaza experiences the world's worst starvation crisis of the past decades. Right now, 100% of Gazans face high level of acute food insecurity, and 96% of households experience water insecurity, according to UN agencies and IPC, the world's barometer on hunger. The famine impacts every human and animal. Also, the few animals left alive experience worsening exploitation given the destruction of infrastructure and of vehicles and the lack of fuel. Gazans have been using donkeys for transporting heavy loads on damaged roads amid severe heat or cold, with most animals malnourished and dehydrated. Looting is another facet of animal abuse here. In August, several platforms reported that dozens to hundreds of donkeys were stolen by the Israeli military under the guise of so-called veterinary rescue. While, of course, starving and severely injured humans did not deserve rescue, some donkeys were taken to farms or sanctuaries in Israel, others taken abroad. Palestinians claim they were looted to prevent their use as mode of transport amid the genocide. Significant to note here is that the statistics we have so far on animals in Gaza only include owned animals. Even in times of peace, no one keeps track of unowned animals, unsurprising given our utilitarian objectifying reports to non-humans. So the number of impacted homeless domestic animals and of wild animals is difficult to approximate. While a precise overall toll is not available, my estimation is that hundreds of thousands to millions of wild and domesticated animals have been killed, injured, maimed, displaced, starved, or looted. And that's because if we add unowned domestic animals and wild animals to the documented owned animals killed by bombs or starved to death, the total reaches hundreds of thousands to millions of impacted individuals. I infer the extent of harm to animals also from the extent of destruction discussed later. For instance, in parts of Gaza, 70 to 90% of trees have been wiped out. And I correlate that to the 250 species of birds in Gaza, with probably tens of thousands of individuals who've now lost their homes. And the same applies to many other animals affected by the ongoing ecocidal assaults, such as the massive sea pollution from sewage and toxic chemicals from munitions and destroyed infrastructure, which harms marine life. Another side of non-human suffering here is captivity. My prior research has documented the severe physical and psychological impact of captivity on animals with complex sentience and numerous civic initiatives challenging captivity. While conventional sites of confinement, such as factory farms, labs, zoos, aquaria, circuses, menageries, and so on, are condemned by many, we also have atypical forms, and captivity during war is one of them. Amid mass atrocity, animals find themselves confined, restrained, immobilized. In Gaza, many animals have been trapped under the rubble, others were stuck chained or tied, confined in stalls, crates, or cages amid bombardment. Whether we're talking about companion animals captive in collapsed homes or domesticated animals raised for food, captive in farms, or wild animals captive in zoos, they found themselves unable to escape with their human caretakers dead, injured, or displaced, so no one there to release and care for them. Captivity amid war means a slow, painful death, and in Gaza, everyone, human and non-human, is captive with borders closed and relentless bombing. There's no escape. Another sinister form of animal abuse is the weaponization of animals. Animals become complicit against their will in genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. We've had reports by locals, by Euromed, Human Rights Monitor, and other NGOs that Israel is using military dogs to torture, terrorize, injure, and even rape Palestinians, with multiple cases of dogs mauling Gazans alive and dead, including women, children, and elderly. That's not new. For decades, Israel has been using military dogs to brutalize Palestinians in prisons or during home invasions, with numerous cases documented. An investigation by the Center for Research on Multinational Corporations has shown that some of the dogs used for crimes in Gaza are imported from the Netherlands, from companies which have supplied the Israeli military for decades. And recently, this center and other Palestinian and Dutch NGOs have sued the Netherlands over its role in facilitating Israel's violations of international law. And one of the demands in this case is halting exports of military dogs. The weaponization of animals is not unique to Palestine. For millennia, animals have been involved in wars, used as means of transport, of communication, espionage, reconnaissance, directly engaged in combat, or used in weapons research. Though animals can become aggressors, ultimately they're victims due to their lack of consent. I see the weaponization of animals amid genocide as animal cruelty. Significant to note here is also the sinister decoupling we witness. For many Israelis, human rights seem disconnected from non-human rights. It's not only Israeli human rights valued over Palestinian rights, but we also often see animal rights valued over and clouding human rights. Israel portrays itself as one of the world's vegan capitals with a growing animal rights movement. And this creates a veneer of ethics and compassion. But some of the same Israelis prizing animal rights have little empathy for Palestinians, humans and non-humans, now blown to pieces or starved to death. Israel's vegan washing runs in tandem with its greenwashing, pinkwashing, and other so-called progressive movements obfuscating state crime. So we have two incompatible yet interlocked processes. One, dehumanizing or animalizing humans. Palestinians are being treated as animals. For instance, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant's infamous quote, "We are fighting against human animals," a sentiment shared by Israeli politicians, military leaders, lawmakers, and ordinary people. And second, we have humanizing non-humans. I've personally witnessed over the years many Israelis treating their companion animals like humans, better treatment than they would ever afford to Palestinians.
We'll pause for a soundscape interlude, after which we'll return with more from Rimona Afana. This is a recording of birds from Shwike in Tulkarem in Palestine by Sounds from Palestine on freesound.org. We're back for the second part of Rimona Afana's discussion about crimes against animals and the environment in Gaza.
Now that I've briefly covered how animals in Gaza are being directly harmed, I'll discuss the broader ecocidal facet of this assault. Crimes against nature which impact humans, non-human animals, plants, microorganisms, and so on. First, we have the chemical dimension. Massive amounts of hazardous substances have contaminated the entire Gaza Strip, harming humans and non-humans for generations. By July this year, Israel had dropped over 125,000 tons of explosives on Gaza. That's the equivalent of multiple nuclear bombs, destruction unprecedented since World War II. Hundreds of thousands of homes, schools, factories, mosques, media offices have been turned to rubble. As mentioned earlier, 92% of housing units, 88% of factories and businesses, and 77% of roads in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. The extent of destruction is catastrophic. With the war now in its 23rd month, the amount of explosives used is immense, which has not only caused massive killing, injuries, maiming, destruction, and displacement, but will also be harming humans, animals, plants, and microorganisms for decades. Explosive munitions can contain lead, antimony, uranium, DNT, TNT, RDX, HMX, and other substances with toxic environmental effects. To this, we add radioactive, chemical, and biological waste from the production of weapons of mass destruction, Israel having, though not confirming nor denying, nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. Besides the release of toxic chemicals in the weapons, the destruction of buildings can release hazardous substances such as asbestos, which can cause fatal conditions like asbestosis, mesothelioma, or lung cancer. It also can release lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, chromium, thallium, formaldehyde, phthalates, flame retardants, and so on. The bombing of industrial facilities comes with additional risks given the large quantities of hazardous substances stored. The millions of tons of debris leave behind nauseous smoke, toxic dust, unexploded ordnance, and other hazards which pose long-term risks to humans and non-humans. So besides the immediate and direct killing and damage from explosives, we also add the long-term and indirect harm to all living beings from contamination with hazardous substances. Next, I cover damage to plants and soil. The toxic substances released by weapons and ruin infrastructure also harm plants and microorganisms in the soil, vital for agriculture. By early spring 2024, half of tree cover and farmland in Gaza had been destroyed by bombardment and bulldozing. Drawing on satellite imagery, a study by Ian and colleagues shows that by September 2024, over 90% of tree crop fields in Gaza City were lost and 73% in North Gaza, with variable losses in other areas, all, of course, considerably worse now in September 2025. Other trees were cut by Gazans to use for heating and cooking, given the severe shortage of gas and electricity. The massive destruction of trees affects the air quality as well as wildlife, particularly birds who've lost their homes. The Gaza Strip had around 250 bird species, all now affected by the ecocidal operations. By July 2025, over 86% of croplands, 83% of agricultural wells, and 71% of greenhouses had been damaged, with now under 1.5% of cropland available for cultivation, according to UN estimates. To confront the ongoing famine, Gazans have been trying to grow vegetables, but much of the soil has become unsuitable for agriculture because of the heavy contamination. And the soil in Gaza was already poisoned from prior wars as well as from Israel's repeated aerial spraying of chemicals like glyphosate, oxyfluorophane, and DCMU or Duron, which are all known or probable human carcinogens with a wide range of toxic effects on non-human animals too. These have damaged farmlands, impacting plants, animals, humans, and microorganisms. This is a form of herbicidal warfare, not unlike the defoliants used in Vietnam, as determined in a report by Forensic Architecture in 2019. Gaza has been turned into a toxic wasteland affecting humans, non-humans, and nature for generations. And the context also matters here for understanding the ties between genocide and ecocide. Environmental harm is embedded in the fabric of Israel's colonial project with myriad practices harming nature. For instance, trees have been for decades victims of Israel's colonialism, occupation, and war. Millions of trees have been uprooted by Israel over the past decades, resulting in millions of dollars of lost income yearly for Palestinian families. Next, my research documents harms from greenhouse gas emissions. Besides killing non humans, the production, transport, use, and disposal of weaponry cause pollution to the air, water, and land, harming entire ecosystems. Militaries are among the largest consumers of fuel globally, their environmental footprint going way beyond 100 million metric tons of CO2 annually. A recent study by Nymark and colleagues shows the projected carbon dioxide emissions in Gaza from war, pre war, and post war activities surpassed the individual annual emissions of over 102 countries. The effects of environmental destruction are even worse felt in densely populated areas. Even before the war, Gaza was one of the most densely populated places on Earth. 365 square kilometers and 2.1 million inhabitants, squeezed by the military operations in 15% of the land, with now each person inhabiting under 24 square meters. That's the size of a Guantanamo prison cell. Gazans have no way out and no prospects of going back to the rest of the Gaza Strip, given estimations that it will take decades to clean up the rubble and rebuild. UN reports show that it may take 80 years to rebuild Gaza. Only removing the over 50 million tons of debris could take up to 20 years. Another UN report notes that once a ceasefire is reached, it would take Gaza 350 years just to restore its GDP to its 2022 level. So the destruction of the natural and built environment breaks human and non-human lives for generations. My next section looks at mass atrocity and epigenetics. In Gaza, the dead are the lucky ones. They escaped. Survivors, however, continue to endure catastrophic conditions and are left with physical and psychological traumas, many which will never heal. But those here and now left in the abyss are not the only victims. Future generations of humans and non-humans will face the many long-term consequences of this genocidal, ecocidal war. The crimes detailed so far are likely to cause epigenetic changes in humans, animals, plants, and possibly microorganisms, all shook by the massive trauma and toxicity. Multiple studies document epigenetic alterations in individuals exposed to chronic stressors, psychological trauma, exposure to toxic substances, impoverished diets, infections, extreme heat or cold, and other factors, and also the inter or transgenerational transmission of some of these epigenetic changes. The long-lasting psychological and physical effects of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity have been covered in the vast literature on intergenerational trauma. Also, many epigenetic changes caused by chronic stressors have been documented in non-human animals, but the intergenerational impact of mass atrocity on animals, plants, and ecosystems is not well understood. That's an area scientists will hopefully explore over the next years. Given the colossal scale of suffering, destruction, and toxicity, there's no return to pre-war normality. All beings in Gaza might develop epigenetic changes in response to the harm experienced, and these alterations will shape and misshape life for decades. We're getting now to your initial quote, Emi, from my section on the merchants of death driving mass atrocity. The crimes in Gaza are a sordid reminder of how the military-industrial complex drives both genocide and ecocide. Violence brings immense profit to weapons corporations, and weapons don't only harm humans. Advanced technologies of violence also impact animals, and not only amid war. They allow the colossal scale and efficiency of killing, and they distance physically and psychologically the killer from the killed. For instance, domesticated and wild animals are massacred with firearms, captive bolt pistols, electrical killing and stunning machines, carbon dioxide chambers, and so on. All are technologies developed and perfected for murder. The tools made to kill humans and non humans are synergistic and significant here, given the sophistication of the Israeli military and a massive military support from the US. Weapons are not simply tools for inflicting death and destruction, but also a driving force behind specific choices about who should be exterminated and why. The profit Israel and foreign corporations draw from colonialism, occupation, annexation, apartheid, and genocide has been widely documented by intergovernmental organizations, non governmental organizations, scholars, and activists. So we need to not just expose and resist Israel's crimes, but also the crimes of war profiteers. And getting to my last section now, which covers the paralysis of international law. Though over the years I've written extensively about this when it comes to crimes against both humans and non humans in Palestine and beyond, legal commentary is actually redundant. For decades, Israel has casually violated with impunity human rights law, humanitarian law, and criminal law. And the modest norms in environmental law and in animal rights law we have, they don't really add much. The laws we have are for the most part narrow, shallow, they're antiquated, out of touch with the realities of contemporary warfare, and on top of all that, they're unenforced. Gaza attests to the law's failure to prevent, halt, and repair mass atrocity. In spite of the unprecedented Palestine solidarity, anti-genocide global movement, Israel's genocidal ecocidal operations continue unabated. Foreign governments continue aiding and abetting genocide. International peacekeeping and accountability bodies remain in paralysis, and corporations continue profiting. But we have a duty to not stay numb, even when we feel nothing we do seems to matter, even if our efforts feel like a band aid. I urge everyone to continue raising awareness about the atrocities, talk about Gaza with family, friends, colleagues, post on social media, donate to grassroots projects, for instance, Sulala Animal Rescue, Gaza Soup Kitchen, and other grassroots projects in Gaza. Go to protests, sign petitions, and also confront the silence of many human rights and animal rights NGOs on the crimes crushing humans and non humans in Gaza for nearly 2 years now and for many preceding decades. We can't forget or forgive their hypocrisy and cowardice. Thank you, Emi.
No, thank you, Rimona. Look, I don't really have questions about your work, but what I do want to say is that thank you for the strength and clarity of it, because I think that is an extraordinary quality, and it's extraordinary work that you're doing, and it's extraordinarily courageous in times that we're living in to carry on and do it. You're absolutely right. We have a duty not to stay numb. I think that's a very, I love that. Although it's weird to say I love that to something that's that heavy. Rimona, I want to thank you again, and I'm going to ask you, before we go, where can people follow your work online? If that's something that you do, and do you have any projects you'd like to promote or anything of that nature?
Yeah, so people can find me on LinkedIn. Facebook, Instagram. And recently, I also set up profiles on X and Blue Sky. I also post on Facebook on the Ecocide Speciesism page, a project I created years ago on environmental crimes and non-human rights. My research on today's topic is not yet published. Those keen on reading it can message me and I'd gladly send you my article. About my other projects, one is a paper I wrote 1 year ago, which I'm now expanding into a book. I document Israel's crimes against the dead and unborn in Gaza. A part of my research on this topic was recently published in Current Affairs. And I'm progressing slowly with a bunch of other projects. One is on temporal torture in Palestine, stealing time, robbing chunks of one's life as a form of torture, which is a reality for all Palestinians. Another project is on civic and legal initiatives against weapons corporations, whose products drive both genocide and ecocide, as I detailed earlier. Another topic I'm writing on concerns the ethical, legal, and biological criteria we use to determine whether animal suffering is necessary or avoidable. And another paper I'm finalizing is on well-meaning captivity. I'm looking at harms experienced by animals trapped in shelters and sanctuaries.
Thank you for that. Thank you for everything that you do, Rimona.
Thank you also, Emi, for being among the few who've been vocal every single day on the atrocities in Gaza for the past 2 years.
Least I can do. I will add nothing more of substance to this episode. All I can say is do what you can. Don't be intimidated. Take inspiration from the general strike in Italy, from the people demonstrating in the UK and all over the world. Organize and free Palestine.
We tear things up when we go round. We burn things up when we go round. We speed things up when we go round.
That's it from me, Emi Leese. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to this podcast, share it with others, and leave a review. Remember, you can get in touch by email at thinklikeaveganbook@gmail.com if you have questions, comments, or want to suggest a guest or topic for discussion. I'd be very happy to hear from you. And you can find more of my work and upcoming events on my website, emilialeese.com, and on social media. And buy a copy of Think Like a Vegan anywhere you buy books and audiobooks or request it from your library. Production credit goes to Jim Moore of Bloody Vegans Productions. Theme music provided by Jenny Moore's Mystic Business from the eponymous album. And the opening tune is Flashbacks. And we close with Tear Things Up.
For more great iRaw podcasts, visit irawpod.com. That's IROARPOD.com.